It started with a knock that didn't belong to me. A hard, insistent pounding at the front door of my own house. A place my family had lived in for 4 generations. A ranch that had stood since the late 1800s. When I opened the door that morning, the sight that met me stopped me cold. There she stood, Karen, the HOA president from down the road, her wide frame filling the doorway, her chin lifted with arrogance that could have cracked glass. But she wasn't there to talk. She was there to inform me that she had taken possession of the house. My house. The words slipped out of her mouth like they were gospel truth, and for a second, the sheer audacity left me speechless. "You've abandoned this property," she barked, waving a stack of papers with HOA letterheads that looked suspiciously like they'd been copied from a bad office printer. "I've been maintaining it for 2 years. Under adverse possession, this house belongs to me now. You should be grateful I didn't bulldoze it." The world tilted under my feet. Abandoned? I had been overseas on deployment, serving my country while paying taxes and bills on this house the entire time. My brother had checked in weekly, but Karen, bloated with her own imagined power, had decided that my absence meant opportunity. And in those 2 years, she had squatted on my land, parked her SUV in my barn, thrown parties on the porch, and even changed the locks. The neighbors had seen it all but stayed silent, too afraid of her threats of fines and retaliation. Now she stood there, brazen as a thief in daylight, declaring my history and my bloodline as her property. Anger surged hot through me, but I knew better than to let it spill uncontrolled. I took a breath and smiled in a way that made her flinch. "Karen," I said slowly, "you just admitted to squatting, and every word you're saying is on this camera right now." I tapped the phone in my hand, already recording. For a moment, the mask slipped from her face, but she quickly sneered again, waving her fake documents like a shield. By that evening, the truth began to unfold like wildfire. I filed reports with the sheriff, bringing my deployment papers, tax receipts, and every deed my great-grandfather had signed. At first, the deputies were hesitant. Karen had woven herself into their ears for years, barking HOA codes and empty legal jargon. But then came the twist. A local historian named Dr. Collins showed up at my gate after hearing whispers of the feud. He carried photographs, letters, and maps proving that my house wasn't just any property, it was a registered historical site, tied to the founding of the county itself. Karen's little game of adverse possession had, without her realizing, turned into a federal matter the moment she laid claim to protected heritage land. When deputies returned with warrants, the look on Karen's face was priceless. She stood on the porch she'd decorated with cheap lawn gnomes, screaming that she was the rightful owner while officers moved around her, cataloging stolen antiques from my attic and livestock feed she had resold. Neighbors gathered, some with arms folded in vindication, others ashamed they had let fear keep them silent. My camera caught it all. Karen clutching her fake paperwork, her shrieks echoing as deputies led her away. But the fight didn't end there. Karen, stubborn as rot, filed her own lawsuit, dragging me into court where she paraded her fabricated documents and claimed I had abandoned my duty as a homeowner. She painted herself as a savior who had rescued the property from decay. The tension in that courtroom was electric, every eye on the battle unfolding between truth and fraud. I stood with my attorney, calm, documents in hand. When the judge asked for proof of ownership, I didn't just provide deeds and tax records. I presented Dr. Collins, who testified about the historic registry, and county officials who confirmed my consistent payments during my deployment. The coup de grace came when my brother played security footage from his visits over the past 2 years. There was Karen, caught on tape, lounging on my porch swing, throwing HOA meetings in my living room, even screaming at a delivery driver who tried to drop off my mail. Gasps filled the courtroom. Karen's smirk withered into something twisted, her face red and blotchy as the evidence stacked against her like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb. The judge's ruling was swift and merciless. Karen was not only guilty of squatting but also charged with fraud, theft, and property damage. She was ordered to pay restitution, fined heavily, and barred from serving on any HOA board ever again. As deputies escorted her out, she wailed about conspiracies and persecution, but no one listened anymore. The courtroom, once tense, erupted in murmurs of relief and quiet satisfaction. When I returned home, it was as if the land itself sighed in relief. Neighbors came forward with apologies, offering help to restore what Karen had damaged. Together, we scrubbed graffiti she had carved into the barn, replanted the garden she had trampled, and replaced locks she had broken. But we didn't just repair what we reclaimed. The house became a gathering place once more, not for Karen's petty tyranny, but for barbecues, music, and shared stories. The land was alive again, pulsing with community instead of fear. And the biggest twist of all? The publicity from Karen's downfall turned the house into a local tourist site, with county tours and school trips scheduled weekly. The very home she had tried to steal became a beacon of resilience and history, a place people visited to learn what happens when arrogance meets truth. Karen's legacy, meanwhile, was sealed in shame. Neighbors who once feared her now laughed at her name. She became a warning whispered in HOA meetings across the state. Never be a Karen, or risk losing everything. And so I sit tonight on the porch she once tried to claim, the sunset painting the sky gold, the laughter of neighbors ringing across the yard. My family's land stands strong, scarred but unbroken, a testament to the truth that roots, whether of land, family, or justice, cannot be ripped out by lies. The days after the trial felt like a strange dream, a mix of relief and raw exhaustion. For the first time in years, I walked through my home without the sense of intrusion pressing down on me. Karen's cheap floral curtains were gone, her gaudy lawn gnomes hauled away, her stench of control scrubbed clean from the walls. Yet reminders of her lingered like scars. Scratches on the wooden floors where she dragged her heavy furniture, holes in the walls from where she'd hammered in her ridiculous HOA plaques, even a burn mark on the porch railing from one of her late-night wine-fueled bonfires. Each mark enraged me at first, but then I realized they weren't just wounds. They were evidence. Proof that she could invade but never own. Proof that no matter how many times she stomped across my property, she could not erase the soul of the land. But Karen wasn't finished. From behind bars, she filed appeal after appeal, spinning fantasies about forged evidence and conspiracies. She even tried to convince the court she and I had some sort of agreement, waving around a forged rental contract that claimed she had been paying me under the table. It would have been laughable if it weren't so cruel. She dragged my name through mud, forcing me into hearing after hearing. But every time, the evidence cut her lies apart like a hot knife through rope. With each failed attempt, her arrogance shriveled further, her voice cracking as judges dismissed her arguments one after another. And then came the twist I never expected. One afternoon, a man knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Richard, Karen's estranged brother. He looked nothing like her tired eyes, a modest stance, humility radiating off him like sunlight after a storm. He explained that Karen had always been like this, obsessed with control since they were children, but it had worsened after their parents died. She had inherited their house and immediately forced him out with legal tricks. I couldn't fight her back then, he admitted, his voice breaking. But I can now. He handed me a folder filled with documents, bank records, old letters, proof that Karen had been siphoning money not just from HOA accounts but from her own family estate, covering up theft that went back decades. When my attorney reviewed them, she whistled low. This isn't just HOA fraud anymore. This is a pattern. She's been running cons her entire life. And sure enough, when prosecutors dug deeper, Karen's financial crimes stretched wider than we imagined. She wasn't just a squatter. She was a serial manipulator, leaving behind a trail of ruined relatives, neighbors, and even charity funds she drained for neighborhood beautification projects that never existed. The community's outrage boiled into fury. People who had once kept their heads down now stood tall, sharing stories of fines they'd paid that vanished into her pockets, of HOA meetings where she intimidated votes, of notices she posted that had no legal standing. It was as if the floodgates opened, and the truth poured out unstoppable. And for the first time, Karen's power was not just broken, it was buried under the weight of a collective voice she could no longer silence. The final confrontation came not in my yard, but in federal court. Karen, shackled and pale, tried one last time to defend herself, spewing accusations of bias and persecution. But when her brother testified, describing years of manipulation and theft, something in her seemed to finally crack. She shouted at him across the courtroom, spitting words that made even the judge recoil. Her mask was gone, her empire ashes. When the verdict came, it was devastating. Years of prison time, full restitution, and a permanent ban from holding any administrative role in any organization ever again. The woman who once strutted with HOA authority now shuffled away in chains, her name cursed instead of feared. But the story didn't end with her collapse. My land began to heal in ways I hadn't anticipated. With Karen gone, the county partnered with me to restore the ranch as a historical site. Volunteers came every weekend, neighbors who had once been her silent prisoners now hammering nails, planting flowers, repainting barns. Families picnicked on the fields, children ran free, and musicians strummed guitars on the porch where Karen had once stood screaming. The house, my house, became a beacon not of fear but of resilience. And then came the moment that cemented everything. One bright spring afternoon, a school bus pulled up and dozens of children spilled out, clutching notebooks. Their teacher explained they were here to study local history and the importance of standing up to injustice. I watched as those kids walked through my halls, touching the walls Karen once claimed as hers, listening to stories of the past, and writing down their own reflections. One little girl tugged my sleeve and asked, "Is it true someone tried to steal your whole house?" When I nodded, her eyes widened. "That's crazy, but you didn't give up." Her words pierced me deeper than I expected. That was the legacy, not just the house, not just the land, but the story. The lesson that arrogance and lies can steal time, but not truth. That no matter how loud a bully screams, their power crumbles when a community stands together. As summer came, the ranch turned into a county landmark. Festivals were held here, honoring local culture. Farmers' markets filled the yard with laughter and barter. The scars Karen left were still visible, the burn mark on the railing, the scratches on the floor, but instead of erasing them, I kept them. I put up a plaque. These marks are a reminder. Power based on lies will always leave scars. But scars can become stories, and stories outlast arrogance. Karen, meanwhile, became nothing but a cautionary tale. Her mugshots circled the internet. Her name whispered like a curse among HOAs across the state. Even inside prison, word was she tried to pull rank, but nobody cared. Her reign was over, her crown shattered, her empire reduced to rubble of her own making. And me? I sit now on the porch at sunset, the air warm and golden, the laughter of neighbors ringing through the fields. The house stands stronger than ever, alive with history, humming with community. Karen squatted for 2 years, but in the end, those years were nothing compared to the 150 years of truth beneath my feet. She thought she could rewrite history with forged documents and a loud voice. Instead, she became a footnote in a story far bigger than her. The land remains, the house remains, and the people remain. Karen is gone. So I ask you, when someone squats on your life, your history, your truth, do you let their lies define you? Or do you stand, scarred but unbroken, until their empire collapses under the weight of what they tried to steal?